A wild horse is an animal that will not hesitate to buck you off. Now that sounds exciting or scary depending on your skill level. Now the same can be said about the Ford Mustang because there's definitely a proud heart beating underneath. But after generation and generations of refinement, it's less of a wild horse and more of, well, a bit more polo club. I'll explain that a little bit later. But first, its price. Whip out the AutoDeal app, available on iOS and Android, of course, and it will tell you that the 2025 Ford Mustang GT is available at 3,999,000 Philippine pesos. Now, while the app doesn't have a V8, it can help connect you to the dealers closest to you really quickly to help you get the best car at the best price. It's also got a lot of promos on there. Now, you may be thinking there surely isn't a promo out for a Mustang. For that, I'll say, nay, there actually is. You can get a Mustang for a low down payment of just over 60,000 Philippine pesos. Granted, the monthly is like over 80 grand, but still, it's a GT. But anyway, this is what I'm talking about, the wild beating heart. It's a 5-liter V8 engine with 486 horses and 567 Newton meters of torque mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission. Nicknamed the Coyote because it probably eats roadrunners, it features what I like to call classic all-American power. Meep, meep. By that I mean naturally aspirated, linear power and torque and an American appetite. Now what does that mean for fuel economy? Well, in the city, you're doing about 5 kilometers per liter. What do you expect? It's a 5-liter. On the highway, a bit better at 16 kilometers per liter, but that's driving really responsibly at like 70 kilometers per hour. Where's the fun in that? It's kind of funny to think that we like to slap horses on cars, the literal things that we replace them with. This 2024 Mustang GT is the same horse, but with a different saddle in a sense. We remember the S550 generation fondly, and this S650 takes things up a notch by giving it more aggressive features. We can't help but notice the Filipinos tend to exoticize this car a lot. It's a striking car to look at, and it exudes a lot of confidence up front thanks to the huge grille, made only more menacing by the hood vents down in the center and the cuts on the side, and the very intimidating headlights. Though a few gripes, like number one, the mirrors are a carryover from the previous generation Mustang. Not our favorite mirrors to use because, well, they're kind of small and could use a bit more mirror. The rear is a love it or hate it kind of a thing. It needs a bit of ducktail or a modest spoiler at the back in my opinion. However, a part that I really like on this car on its side is the 19-inch wheels, which are gorgeous, and they come wrapped in Pirelli P0 tires that are 255 in the front and 275 at the rear. And its ground clearance is a respectable and usable 143 millimeters. It isn't a lot, it's modest actually, but quite large for a car that is supposed to be more of a sports car. This is 322 liters of space. Doesn't sound like much on paper, but it's actually quite deep. It's a bit on the shallow side, but good enough for overnight bags, even like your larger maletas, if you can fit it into this small little hole here. Heck, that's even big enough to fit in a person like Earl, and then enough for him to escape with this latch, which we've tried.
It's true.
Yeah, see, it's true. It's tight, yes, it is, but I will say that it's not so bad. This is probably a bit more comfortable than other third rows in SUVs where your knees are sort of like to your chest already. This is, well, for a person of my size sitting behind, this is Earl's driving position, and I'm okay with it. If that was Jack's driving position, that might be a different story altogether. But in like Earl or my driving position, yeah, you could fit small adults back here. The legroom isn't anything great, but you do have height in the form of where you're sitting to the floor, so there's that. The headroom also isn't anything great, so really it's definitely for small adults like I said. And toys? Yeah, forget about it. There are no toys back here. You are at the mercy of these two guys, which is where you want to be anyway. You do get ISOFIX tethers though. Yeah. Now, here at the business end of the Mustang, I'm a bit perplexed, really. See, with the old Mustang, you had nice touches to it, like toggle switches that felt good to the touch. You had rings around your instrument cluster. The aircon vents were actually memorable, and the like. Here, well, it feels a bit more digital than anything else, really. You've got a 12.3-inch screen as your instrument cluster, which is great. You've got a 13-inch screen as your infotainment system, which is great as well. And that's attached to a 12-speaker system, Bang & Olufsen, with a sub at the back. Really, really good. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, both wireless. You have charging points, adaptive cruise. All of this stuff is great. The tech is really great. It's just, I'm a little lost. It's lost on me that this used to be a very analog car, and that's what I kind of miss, you know? The counterpoint, however, I must admit, is that this new Mustang will appeal to a totally different audience, a new audience, a younger audience that want the feeling of a Mustang, that 5.0, but also want the tech and the niceties that you get in modern day technology cars. So yeah, I feel as if that it speaks to a whole new audience. And while I do appreciate the tech, and I'm sure that the new generation will too, I'm just saying I kind of miss the old one. But I ain't complaining about this one. But I miss the old one.
You could just buy an old one.
You know how expensive that is? With all the tech that's inside this car, and it's all great, and the build quality is absolutely great too, that's improved by a lot, there is one feature that's missing, oddly enough. When you first step inside this car, you'd think to be like Andre the Giant, where your neck is like this thick and you can't move because of how wide and how long the car is. It takes some time to get used to. So you'd think you'd need all the help that you can get. So when you're parking, you want a 360 camera, but there isn't one. And that's strange. If it's any consolation, it does have a reverse camera and sensors, so there's that. While I have sat in other sports cars that are a bit more comfortable in the sense where the bolstering isn't as tight, here inside this car, it is snug, but it's also forgiving at the same time because it's not as tough, right? And getting into your proper driving position is a breeze inside this car because the telescopic steering really comes out to you. The seats are not powered, but they can be easily adjusted very quickly, I might add, up and down as well. And I like this little thing where it does look like a manual parking brake, but it's actually electronic. So to put out the parking brake, you just pull it, and to kill it, push it down. That's genius, man. That's like 5.0 genius.
What is that supposed to mean?
Like, you know, when you go to school, you have a 5.0
cinco,
average.
ganon.
Cinco.
Okay. But it's a quattro.
Cinco. Okay, so now we're gonna go out for a drive. We're gonna hit the twisties, and I want the MagneRide suspension to be a bit stiff, and I want to put it in track mode and whatnot. And that's all well and good. There is just one problem. For people of my age and my size, it's painful to reach for the seat belt that's all the way in the back. Aray. It kind of hurts your shoulder a little bit and your traps. So for a car like this, it would be better if you actually turn, grab the seat belt, and then put it in. It makes you look kind of senior, but at least you don't hurt yourself. Anyway, do please subscribe to our channel because we create all these videos so that we can pay for the gasoline of this car. So I gotta put this guy in track. It's in track mode already. Yeah, baby. Oh, there are children. There are children present. We can put it on sneaky mode. There, it's on quiet mode. That's quiet? It's louder than Earl.
You know there's a workaround to the seatbelt, right?
What do you mean?
Just reach from it from under.
Hmm? Oh.
This is kind of like our job, guys.
I feel
dumb.
I feel defeated. Eh, wala, I'm used to. Yeah, okay.
Guess who's sitting at the back later?
Not me, I'm driving.
This is Jack.
Why Jack?
How am I supposed to film?
GoPro? once you've dialed in all your settings and modes and screens and you want it to be, like right now we're on normal, it's actually a pretty decent cruiser, like a daily cruiser. It can be. It's comfortable, well, as comfortable as a bucket seat can be. It's relatively quiet. You're well isolated from the wind noise. The road noise, not so much, because after all, these are very thin and wide tires, but it's acceptable. Thankfully enough that you're not too isolated that you can't hear the exhaust at the rear or the engine up front, because that is just, well, that's a symphony, man. I just spent so much gasoline on doing that. But if you want to have a little bit more fun, like pedal to the metal, put her in sport, and all of a sudden the throttle and the suspension and the steering response becomes a little bit tighter, you feel more engaged, and for some strange reason, now this is a cliche, but yes, the car definitely becomes a completely different animal. It's still a horse, but it's a wild one. I also do feel that the car feels like it's got a lot more to give than what it presents. Like, obviously, it's close to already 500 horses, but it feels like it can do much more than that. And I'm glad that the car is also intelligent enough, like with all the advanced driver assist systems and the traction control. It's definitely more than enough to keep you out of trouble. And if I were me, how is that even English? If I were me,
What are you trying to get at?
I don't know,
just
Jack.
Say it. Say it.
If I were you and you were me, I'd keep the traction control on. That's what I was trying to say. But obviously, since this car is very high tech, you can turn all of those systems off and just go hog wild.
Horse wild?
Hog wild, horse wild, animal wild, it's Jack's terms, really. To the extent that there's even a line lock in this thing to make burnouts look even better. And the same parking brake, you can use it as a drift brake. Should we?
No.
I'm just asking. You don't have to be so violent in the way that you answer.
If we had like a...
Jeez.
Like a,
Ow. I feel, though, that Ford has really mastered this chassis. It's really, really good. It's stiff. It feels really strong. And with the Magna-Ride suspension, it is a great pairing. Long gone are the days where muscle cars could only go straight. This one can take turns and do it well. Speaking of turns, Earl did say that he found the steering a little bit dull. And I wouldn't exactly call it dull. It's just a bit on the slower side. There are more reactive steerings. But because the tires are so wide and they grip so well, it still feels as if that if you were to point the car in any direction, it just goes. All things considered, this car really has everything that you need and even more than what you need. In the sense that it's scary good that it can go so fast and you're not scared about how scary you're going. And that is what really scares me. That'll make sense to you.
Okay.
This most definitely is the best Mustang to date, looking at it from a technological and engineering standpoint. It's got almost all the bells and whistles. It's got a striking design. It's brash, it's loud, it's excessive. It just screams, look at me, wherever it goes. And I do understand why people are drawn to it. It looks like a beast from the exterior, but when you drive it normally, you can make it quite livable, which is what we were going on about how it's sort of like lost a little bit of its wilderness. But if anything, that just basically makes the car more appealing to a wider audience, which can only be a good thing. It's comfortable when you need it to be, wild when you want it to be. That's a multi-talented thoroughbred.